All right. Good morning, Kavra. Nice to see everybody. Let's go ahead and start learning. As soon as these two people get let in, we will get going. There you go. Thanks, Lisa. Awesome. All right. So today's topic was, I believe, entitled What Truly Counts, right? And obviously, we're in a time period right now, which is coming to a close, where we've been counting the days between Pesach to Shavuot. Each day, it's a very unique thing, meaning that generally we have mitzvot that come once in a while, but it's unique that every single day there was a specific mitzvah to count a specific day leading up to ultimately Shavuot. But what's very interesting is we can't say what you might want to say, that it's a countdown from Pesach to Shavuot, because it's not a countdown. See, normally when you're waiting to get to a destination, right now, for example, we know that kids across the world have calendars, that they're marking off squares, counting down to the last day of school where their freedom will finally be experienced. It's a countdown to that final moment. Or I think recently there was a SpaceX or something like that, which got launched, which is a tremendous time period. And there is always a tremendous, milestone, I think. And there's a countdown, as we all know, 3, 2, 1, towards liftoff. What's curious about the counting that we do from Pesach to Shavuot is it's not actually a countdown. It's a count up, which we usually don't do when we're counting. There's only certain times that we count up. We count up when there's something that we deeply love. So, for example, a person who has their money, let's say, on the base level, who loves their money, right? They don't count down their money, right? Hopefully not. They're counting up. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. You always count things up that have value, right? So, therefore, there's something over here in this counting process that's saying that not only is the end goal important, but it's actually the counting process of the day. As we often say, or as one could say, right, we don't just count the days. The goal is to make each day count. That's the key on what truly counts. Meaning, very often, each day that we spend, it's not how do we get past that day to reach the end goal. It's not like how do I get past 6 days of the week to get to the weekend. Each one of those days are supposed to be significant in and of themselves. A mental image that I sometimes keep in mind when I speak about this or when I think about this is that they're not hurdles that we have to get over. So much of our days, we feel like, how do we get past this day? How do we overcome the challenges that are over there? And if you have this image of a hurdle, of a block that you've got to get over, so obviously life becomes extremely exhausting. And you look back and you say, great, I got over these hurdles and I got to my end goal. But what if each of those blocks weren't hurdles, but rather they were stepping stones? And that each time you saw one of those, you didn't get over it, but you grew through it and you stepped up, not over. See, I think part of the day that we're dealing with when we speak about the count from Pesach, our freedom, to Shavuot, where we're sitting there and saying, give me the playbook, God, I'm ready to go, is how do we build ourselves, train ourselves to becoming the character during practice so that when we actually receive the playbook, we're ready to go. And therefore, I think that's not only a message that counts by Shavuot in terms of how we view things. I believe it's something that's very pertinent to how we view every single day that we go through. What truly counts is making each and every day count, period. But I think there's also another facet which isn't connected to Shavuot, because when I first started to think about it, I'm like, oh, this is perfect for what happens around this time period, as we're on day, I think, 45 right now, almost nearing Shavuot. But there's also counting in terms of numbers. On the daily podcast that I do, I was a couple days ago, I was talking about numbers and statistics a little bit. If you're interested to join the podcast, you're welcome to. Just send me an email. I'll add you to the list. We've been going about 100. We've been counting. If I count the days, 1,600 and I think 10 or 12 days straight for the past 1,612 days each day. So recently we were talking about statistics, and what happened was I was driving home from a carpool and I was listening to the radio one Sunday morning on 680, and I found it so curious that 4 out of 6 of the main stories that were being spoken about were about the Jewish people, about Israel and the Jewish people. It was about what's happening in Israel, about the cease talks at that time. It was about what happened at the Chabad school, the shooting. It was just, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, 4 out of 6 of the main stories are focused around us. And in Toronto, I then Googled this information. In Toronto, there's about 6.5 million people, of which we know the Jewish people, thanks to our statistics, are about 200,000. It means we're about 3% of the entire Toronto population, yet we dominated about 66% of the news headlines, which is crazy. And even if you think about the world in terms of the focus that's there, it's also insane, right? So we're approximately 16 million Jews, and the world population, give or take probably a few hundred million, is 8 billion people, right? So you would expect to not hear about 0.2% of the population nearly as often as we hear. No matter what it is that we do, it shouldn't make a dent, because we know that anything that we're doing and definitely being accused of, right, A, is false, and B, it doesn't compare to what's happening probably simultaneously at this moment in countries that are taking place with some of those exact same allegations that are against us. Yet, even though we're 0.2%, right, somehow we seem to be an obsession that we really count for something. And one has to believe that to a certain degree that's by design, right? That there's a reason why, because it doesn't really make sense according to any logical argument. Maybe one day we'll explore the importance or understanding rather of anti-Semitism from a Jewish lens, but the numbers don't make sense. If you count the numbers, it doesn't make sense. And the truth is, if you were to sit there and say, let's count the Jews to see how big we are, it will be a very depressing reality when we try to say there's strength in numbers. If we say there are strength in numbers, we have just lost. Meaning we know, like from looking around the world, right, that no matter where we turn, we will never, ever win the numbers game. And perhaps maybe I was thinking that's why there might be a biblical violation to count Jews. The Torah says, it's a pasuk in Shmos, I can send it to people, where a person shouldn't count people. And if they do, they've got to give some sort of kapara so that there's not a plague. And in fact, it talks about in the Gemara and the Tractate in Brachot that David HaMelech actually made that mistake once. He was counting his troops and there was a huge plague that went around, right? Why, how, Kabbalistically, what's the point of that? But we know that ironically, even though every person is important, we don't count people. We don't count the Jews. And I think that there's possibly two reasons for that. Two that we can discuss now. One is, like we said, there will be nothing more depressing when we take a Jewish census and we sit there and compare it to the numbers of the world. If we were to say, you know, and I encourage everybody, and if you haven't yet signed up for the walk, please do so. It's amazing. But actually, I'll get back to why I think it's impressive, right? So if you say, great, you know what, let's come out in numbers. We can have more numbers than they have. The truth is, I believe maybe at this one rally, but we know that the average, I don't know what, I know our population is 200,000. If someone wants to Google it and share it on the, on the chat or pipe in, what's the Muslim population in the GTA? Honestly, I have no clue. My gut is maybe it's more than 200,000. I don't know. I'm curious actually, but definitely worldwide on that global stage, we definitely know that it is billions, right? So we're far outnumbered from what our number is. And therefore, we don't count Jews because it could be a very depressing reality if we think that the key to strength is strength in numbers. So how do we count Jews? And I remember seeing this said beautifully actually by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs one time. He says that we don't actually count Jews. The way that we count Jews if we want to is we count them in the following manner. We ask Jews to give, and then we count their contribution. Meaning a while ago, we spoke about the idea of a machatzis a shekel, about everybody gave a half a shekel to the ultimate, running of the Jewish community center, the temple, right? And it's ironic that the way we count isn't saying 1, 2, 3, 4, how many people do we have? We ask people to contribute. And then when the way we know how many Jews or the power of the Jewish people is by counting their contribution. And that's why I actually think that the numbers currently that are even for the walk for Israel are so impressive. If we think about the fact that there's 200,000 Jews, right? And right now they're slated to have over 20,000 possibly marching the streets in support of Israel. That's 10% of the Jewish people that are standing up, right? That percentage is astounding. It's unbelievable. And I'll also be done l'kav zchus. I'll give merit. Some people can't make it. Other people are going to express their support for Israel in different ways, right? Not one fits all. It's not a judgment on. But on more importantly, it's a way to say, wow, how do you count? When you make yourself count, that makes a difference. And to that, thank you so much. 10% are Muslim in the GTA of $8 million, of 6 million people. So they win the numbers game. They win the numbers game here. That means my math is not so great. What does that mean? They're about 600,000 plus to 200,000. So we lose the game. But what's impressive is when a Jew wants to be counted, what truly counts is we ask them to contribute in whichever way they contribute, to stand up and make a difference. And then we count the difference that each person makes. And when we look at that, then we can perhaps have an understanding of why the Jews have achieved what they have achieved and become who they become. And even on the world stage, you will not find a people that contribute per capita more, not only financially, but we all know that when something happens around the world, it's Israel that stands up even against our mortal enemies. When they're facing danger, we say, let's put ours aside. We're here to help, because the way you count is by showing that you do something. And I think that's such an important message that dovetails with Shavuot at the same time. As we're sitting there and building towards what it means to be Jewish and to receive this playbook, it only counts if we take it and we run with it in some way. We find a way to make a contribution. Contributions come in many different ways, in time and finances, in the way we raise our family, in the way we build our own selves to be a stronger person, to give more to the community in the ways that we can. But one thing for sure, we don't count Jews, we count the contribution that each Jew makes. And if we go back to the original contribution where we said everyone gave a half, Judaism said it doesn't matter how much you give, but if you want to count, then you've got to contribute in some way. And I think going into Shavuot, into the Walk for Israel, and as we move forward, never to be disparate by the fact that we're not going to win the numbers game. Listen, I did my bit. We've got 8 kids. I'm trying, but we're not going to win. We're not going to outwin the numbers. If we're not going to outwin the numbers, it doesn't mean we're going to lose the ultimate goal of making the world the way that we want to. It just needs us to give that much more of ourselves. So as we go into these days, definitely sign up for the walk if you haven't done so yet, or contribute to Israel. B, as you get ready for Shavuot, think about at least the next few days. It's a very significant 3 days leading up to Shavuot called Shloshes Yemei Hagbala, 3 days where we prepare to receive anything that a person has to take in life. You have to receive. You have to get there. If a person's running a play, we use the concept or the analogy of a playbook. If you're running a play to catch a ball, you have to run first in order to be where you have to be to catch it. You got to do work. You don't just catch it on the starting line. You got to get to where you have to get to. So these 3 days are great days for preparation towards that. And may we merit to go ahead and receive that which we're given in order to ultimately re-gift that forward and contribute to the world through that as well. Chevra, wishing you an awesome Shabbos. We won't see each other before Shavuot, an awesome Shavuot as well. And I'll stop the recording. As always, if there's any questions, please feel free.